What it is, what it was, what it shall be. We're back again. Today's video, Spirit War Boot Camp number 105. Today we're going to be talking about metacognition and also metalearning. So what is that? So something that goes beyond cognition. So it's cognizing your own cognition. So what does that mean in a simple layman's terms? It means understanding your mental patterns, particularly focus, right? So in engaging in metacognition means that you're thinking about your awareness, or you're aware of your awareness, right? So to like alertness and mental focus would be some of the most important examples to learn about metacognition with, right? So if you become distracted, or if you become low attention or scattered attention, you want to notice that immediately so you can course correct. And so this is what we call cognitive cybernetics. So a thought process almost always will cycle in such a way. It's called iteration. Even the LLMs are all everything, and all the AI is based on recursion. And so this is where metacognition and cybernetics come in. So you want to know where you are in the cyclical process, right? And you want to, every time you have an input and an output cycle, you want to advance the depth and precision of your formulations, right? So you're refining your formula, basically. So a key part of that is this metacognition, which is the ability to understand your own thought processes and to control them to various degrees, right? So to be able to cultivate and sustain intense focus for a prolonged duration. This is the basis of the entirety of Tantra. Like, if you really want to understand what Tantra is, this is exactly what it is. It's so Tantra, we have the sutra, which is the thread, right? And then we have Tantra, which is like a cross thread, right? So it's a woven pattern. So the sutra, in order to even be at sutra level, you have to have continuity, like a thread. You don't want the thread to have knots. You don't want it to be broken. You don't want it to be kinked and have its trajectory abruptly altered, right? You want it, because that's going to weaken it. You want it to be threaded perfect, straight, and with perfect tension, not too tight, not too loose, right? That's how you tune up the thread. Now, if you want to get into Tantra, now you've got where you're integrating threads in a pattern, right? So you're creating a meta pattern. But without the thread, without the sutra of continuity, basically, what's the point? There is no point. You can't really form a structure, a complex, interwoven, multi-dimensional structure, like without having single dimensional continuity, right? So this is often called the mind stream, or the continuity of awareness, right? So this is the basic unit. And how do we train this? Okay, so how do we engage in metacognition in the Buddhist path, right? So what we're doing is we're observing our patterns, and we're implementing a pattern of continuity. So in other words, we learn from the ancient masters, and just as they repeated something till it was committed to memory, like this is common, and this is the norm in Buddhist scholarship, is the memorization of thousands and thousands of pages of information. Okay, that's the core. And so what does that demonstrate? It demonstrates continuity of awareness, and also preservation of information. So you have the chain of custody of data, like you know where your data came from. You have ancient trusted sources of it, and also, even if all the books get burned, the monks have it memorized. So they can pick up, if they have to pick up and go to Bangladesh or some shit, or they got to go to Orisha, or they got to go to Ladakh, or wherever they got to go, to Kathmandu, right? So they're or Tokyo, they're going from place to place, right, through Hanoi and stuff like that, or through wherever. They're all over the place. And so they have continuity. They can take the message from wherever they learned it, Lumbini, right? If they were initiated by the Buddha himself at Lumbini or somewhere like that, or the Vulture Peak, right? Rajgir or Vajragiri, all these things. So this is how you establish the continuity and the chain of custody. So that's an aspect of metacognition, is understanding the chain of custody and the continuity of awareness. Are we distracted or not? What is the intensity of our focus? How fine can we thread our continuity of awareness? How fine of a thread can we create? And how easily we want to have total ease and relaxation. It's just like yoga. Like most people can't physically do a yoga posture, but the point of an asana is to be able to sustain it for extended periods. And so same with the mind. There's a mental asana, which is called the Mahamudra in one sense. So a mudra is a sign or a seal, generally often symbolizes, it's a posture. That's another way. It has multi definitions, but a posture, a position, right? Often hand mudras. So they have hand mudras, so different gestures and very, very specific configurations of the hands to encode information. It's like a sign language if you think about it. And so it's bringing the mind to awareness. So it's threading the mind through a particular needle, right? It's keeping it in a certain thread. It's keeping the flow in a certain very precise circuitry, right? For extended periods of time and with control. And so all these demonstrate metacognition. So it's understanding your own awareness. When are you distracted? When are you lazy? When are you too wound up, right? It's called agitation and laxity. That's one way of terming it, So it's like a basic up and down. Are you high energy? Are you low energy, basically? But sometimes low energy is a very good state for focus. It's just, you need to be aware of where you are on the scale, where your frequency is at, basically. So that's just a thumbnail sketch of what metacognition is. It's understanding our own thought processes, basically, and being able to shift them at will and have the knowledge of how to do that and the skill to achieve that. So that's metacognition. So what is meta-learning? Well, meta-learning generally is the range of disciplines that go into the thing of, how do you learn how to learn? How do you improve your learning ability? Well, one quick way is what I was just saying, how the Buddhists do. They repeat complex sequences. They use rhythm, they use rhyme, they use musical intonation, they use scent. So they're creating a multi-sensory information hologram for their mind. Which you could say, like, a lot of people talk about the Lotus Sutra or the Diamond Sutra, right? So these are texts that have been repeated by millions, probably hundreds of millions of monks over approximately 2,500 years or more. There's some pre-Buddhist Tantra, actually. So there's Tantras that are older than Buddha. And actually most of the Buddhists, we're often taught in the conventional education system that he was some kind of radical thinker, but that's not the case at all. He went his own way, so to speak, but he learned and studied from all the different masters. And all the masters, even in those days, they would all debate each other, so they were always comparing ideas, and they're in a state of evolutionary mental development. They're not in dogmatism, right? They're not in stasis, right? But in order to get into even a dynamic cultural development, you have to have the preservation, the ability to encode information and to remember it and to store it and to have a meta-analytic. So not only do you have the information, but you have an analytic second order awareness of different types of, you could say exegesis or whatever, different things like that. So it's an interpretive matrix. To not just do you have the raw data and information, but you have an interpretive matrix and you have a data analytic to analyze the data that you have. Like, for instance, even a low-grade Buddhist will know the Pali script, right? They'll know Sanskrit, Pali script, Brahmi, right? Gandhari script, Tamil script, Chinese, kanji, Japanese, katakana and kanji, right? So Buddhism is all about learning all the languages and taking the teachings of different parts of the world and understanding the adaptive process to transmit the Dharma to various different cultures who have different cultural values, who they have a different lived experience, they have a different physical environment, they have different types of livelihood, right? So you need to be able to adapt the teachings to all those people. So already we're looking at metacognition, right? So you're looking at different people. How do they think? What are their habitual thought processes, right? That's the basis of metacognition. And so is that very process. But in the same token, you learn about your own internal process. So you learn about your inner processes, and you learn to observe other people's processes and learn how those processes can tend to shape events and shape outcomes. So that's metacognition. Now, meta-learning is where you learn how to learn. So you know about the physical hardware of the body, the brain, neurotransmitters, choline, acetylcholine, right? Serotonin, dopamine, melatonin, all these hormonal and neurotransmitters, GABA, I could go on and on. There's 5-HTP. There's like millions and millions of chemical factors that go into our mental function. Sugar, for instance, glucose, sucrose, maltose, on and on. Like, these are all things that could be very helpful to have an understanding of both metacognition and metalearning, because both are thought processes, right? And our educational or heuristic processes by which you try to encode information into our awareness and to be able to transmit it in a variety of ways, through music, through sound, through art, through sculpture, through architecture, through cuisine, right? These are all ways that the Buddha Dharma has been communicated, okay? So that's some crazy shit. And you can apply that same, multivariant analysis to all forms of information transmittal, right? I'm really getting into information holograms. I've never heard anyone else talk about this. This is something that I think my terminology and my formulation of a mental hologram, I'm not getting that from anyone else. This is something that I came up with, but this is the idea of multi-dimensional information holographic structures, right? Three-dimensional information storage, right? We look at letters on a page, those are two-dimensional. We could look at geometry of 3D shapes, right? And that can take on some type of semiotic value. We can use it symbolic way to communicate information, right? Like in feng shui, for example, the pyramid is the fire, it's red, right? The yellow square is the earth, and so on. Often then you'll have like a crescent moon, you'll have like the sphere, right? These all represent different things. Interestingly, the element of the kosh or ether, the spirit element, is egg-shaped. That's pretty interesting. I never even thought about that before. That's super deep, actually. But yeah, so the ellipse is the most fundamental form. And when we're looking at living things, they're all created by eccentric ellipse rather. So an ellipse with two variant focal lengths, if you will. So they have, like an egg, right? Like a chicken's egg. It's thicker at one end than the other, but it's still an ellipse. It's an ellipse of unequal sizes of two circles, right? So that tells us a lot about spirit. There's deep knowledge, but I'm not going to go too far into detail with that. But I want to just introduce the concept of metacognition and metalearning. And these are things that I've been studying for a long time. And if you were to ask me what is the single most important thing, I would say that this thing isn't even really a goal in itself. It's a key that opens up every other skill, right? No matter what if you're trying to fix a car, learn how to fix a car, learn how to ride a bicycle, learn how to, blah, blah, blah. Every skill that you could possibly want to obtain, if you have metacognition and metalearning, that's going to guarantee that you're head and shoulders above everyone else in terms of refining your skill level, right? And so I like the cybernetic analogy. So a cybernetic process is a recursive process that increases in accuracy or increases in aptitude and adaptability over time. So it's a process that refines it. It's a self-correcting process, assuming that it's constructed properly. This has a lot to do with what people call an algorithm, which is an incremental series of processes that are clearly defined that can produce a wide variety of divergent outcomes. So that's like an algorithm. For example, everyone talks about the algorithm on YouTube, like how it selects videos for you, tries to find something based on your interests, combined with selling you shit, target marketing you in all these different ways. I love it. I mean, you do have to spend a lot of time filtering out the propaganda and stuff like that. But if you sculpt your algorithm with a great intensity, like I have, it works super good. Like every day, I'm always super thankful for stuff that the algorithm brought me, because it's data mining. It's data mining me, and it knows what my interests are. So that's, it brings me unexpected cool shit constantly. I think it's programmed to do that. It's trying to seduce our consciousness. So this comes back into the same thing of metacognition and metalearning. So now we're in an information society, an information economy, and an attention economy. Everybody knows about this. This is why they have engagement analytics and engagement farming and whatever. It's like you're trying to basically work within this super, lopsided system to produce often not even a good result in the long run. Like, it's a bizarre system that's here to information farm us. Like, it has to cater to our attention, and to some extent, but it also knows how to manipulate our attention. So this is why metacognition becomes a basic survival skill. This ties in a lot with what I've been saying previously about the memetic warfare, and how we need to build memetic competency in the information space and the idea space, because now we're in a basis of reality war, right? So our reality is sculpted, and we're given a synthetic false reality and a deceptive reality, and like holograms, AI, robots, all these different simulacra. Like, we're given multi-dimensional simulacra that's all kind of more or less attacking the consciousness and trying to parasitize our individual consciousness to drain it for someone else to make money and so on, like that. I'm trying not to do that. What I'm trying to do is actually give high-level multivariant analysis and information, high density of information to people that's super valuable and that will preserve their life and their health. It will allow them to effectively connect with other living beings, not just humans, but energy beings like our planet, our environment, plants, animals, microbes, insects, what have you. Like, it's good to be able to think in all these ways and understand the cooperative basis of reality. And so that's another important thing about metacognition, is the idea that the reality that we perceive is contingent upon our attitudes, our likes and dislikes, our emotional state, our cognitive state. These all color our reality that we perceive. And so, and also things like what modern theorists have termed like the reticular activating system. Like, what do you give importance to with your consciousness, right? What do you consider important information versus what you ignore, or some things that you actively repress? So it's like you get information and data and stimuli comes into your environment that you don't prefer, and so you try to delete it. Like they say, people that have selective hearing or stuff like that, that's a good example. That's a real phenomenon that's biologically based for sure. So but what I'm trying to get into is how, by understanding our physiology of the body, by understanding the different brain structures like the corpus ceruleus, that's highly involved in attention and focus, all these different brain structures, the hippocampus, all these different things, the medulla oblongata, the amygdala, like all the, dude, so important to understand brain function, at least in theory, like to really understand that there's multiple components to our consciousness, not just our physical senses and our likes and dislikes, but there's actually a hardware that's at play as well. There's actually a physical hardware that has a particular type of function, and that if we understand that function, like this is something that Tim Refot gave me that I'm going to be eternally grateful to. In his book, he talks about this. He's talking about auto-visualization of fine-scaled neurostructures within the brain and the function that can serve. By internally visualizing the different brain structures, you can stimulate them at will and learn to exert control over it. And a lot of biofeedback stuff they have now makes that even much more fine-tunable. Like they have these $500 headsets that you can have now that have like, they monitor your blood pressure, your temperature, electrical activity, like EEG type of shit. But also they have this, it's super complicated, but basically what they claim is that it gives you kind of like a functional fMRI almost, by measuring subtle electrical phenomenon within the brain. And they have even a higher, the $500 one's cool. Then they have like $1,000 one that has like, I think like 24 contact points on the head. So it's giving you, it can actually measure spatial brain activity, so we're at a very, this is why I keep saying golden age. Like the golden age technology is all around us, but people don't care because they exist in an information economy where they're basically herded into whatever's profitable for consumerism and to sustain their attention and farm their attention off them for profit. But also in a crazy way, like if you think about it, the devices actually are interfacing with our biological fields on a quantum level. So they're influencing us in a much more subtle way than people have ever contemplated. And this is another reason why I want to teach people about metacognition, is to understand the psychological, neurological, physiological effects of our technology, and how, you need to, like, you can leverage all that. That can become a golden age technology for you if you have a high level understanding of it and you use it for this proper purpose, which is, as I'm saying, metacognition and metalearning, to improve your ability to learn and to data bomb. This is what I do all day long. I data bomb myself constantly. Like if I don't have an incoming stream of data, like it's very uncomfortable, right? That's so I'm always like, I'm always playing audio tapes. I'm always playing video. I mean, I'm sure there's a downside to that, but I'm programming my brain with information while at the same time learning how to learn faster, right? And using these techniques that have been passed down for thousands of years to open up the neuroplasticity at will, by diet, by your physical postures, by improving blood flow and blood circulation. You could take a lot of different herbs like ginkgo biloba, gotu kola, cinnamon, cloves, cayenne pepper. Like there's all different things that you can do to improve your flow state, if you will, to improve your mental functioning. And like I said, it's multidimensional. So there's physical things that you can do, pranayama, sitting postures, all your asanas and stuff like that. That's good to influence the brain and get the blood flow going, right? But there's a very simple rule. And again, so what I want to emphasize to people is I'm just trying to show how these ancient methods that my Dharma teachers and my gurus have taught me, it's actually rooted in meta-learning. All the modern people that are writing books on meta-learning and doing all this university research, they're picking up the late end scraps of what these dudes have been doing for 1,000 years. And one of the key things is like periods of intense focus and activity punctuated by periods of rest that actually allows you to assimilate, and by relaxing the mind. Okay, so first you flex the mind and you want to relax the mind. And so that flexion, relaxation reflex is something that a lot of cognitive science have touched upon in terms of, storing long-term memory and assimilating data and skills, not just data, but physical skills. Like that's a key part of learning as well, as muscle memory, stuff like that, where you're training your body to perform physical activities. And in fact, like I said with the mudras, this is something that's also long been utilized, is to assume an unusual bodily posture in a regular way, so that when you do that, you're signaling to your body, okay, here's what comes next. Here's where we are in the algorithm. Like if you have a series of asanas and you do the same thing every day, especially if you do it at the same time of day, right? Or actually you want to do 6-session yoga. So this is very similar to what Buckminster Fuller talked about in his Dymaxion sleep concept. Was he deduced that if you sleep six 20-minute periods, and you'll go into faster REM. He was able, and this has been duplicated. A lot of people have replicated this. If you sleep for short, and that's, even Thomas Edison was famous for his so-called cat naps in the lab, So this is back to what I was saying earlier about how you flex and then relax the mind. So by going into these 6-session yogas or whatever your formula is, you're programming a physical and a cognitive algorithm into the body. And it's going to, like, for instance, I'll just give my example. I was just going half-ass and I was just doing this sadhana. Of course, it is in Tibetan, which is kind of hard to pronounce, and it has a lot of specialized vocabulary that you have to learn. But in a couple years, I went from stumbling through it and stuttering my way through. Now I have it almost entirely memorized. I barely have to consult the text at all. For 2 hours of constant chanting combined with pranayama, combined with mudras and so on, bodily postures. And I could tell you through evidence that this meta-learning works. It has dramatically increased my cognitive capacity. I always had a good memory, and I always was really fond of memorizing long things. And so was my grandpa. I think I got that from him partially. But so, this is a skill that can be improved upon. It can be cultivated from scratch, and wherever you're at on the skill, you can always improve upon it. And the way to facilitate that and to maximize that is through these two processes that I'm calling metacognition as well as meta-learning. And so it's a deep topic. I just wanted to get a video out this week. I'm trying to do one video per week, but I could go and do at least an hour-long thing on this. But for now, I want to just keep it brief and introduce this concept because I'm trying to shoehorn into what I call in the Golden Age blueprint. And basically, this is a complex platform of 8 different cognitive and scientific disciplines that, to me, found the basis of the Golden Age philosophy, the golden age societal construct that I'm trying to advocate. And it's not new, really. It's not, like I was saying, how the Buddha had the eight-spoked wheel, the eightfold noble path. Like, that goes way, way back. That didn't just come from him. You know what I mean? He's pulling forward this cart. He's pulling forward the wheel and the chariot of the Dharma, right? It was already there. He didn't invent the wheel, so to speak. But there's a great similarity between this eightfold noble path and what I'm calling the eightfold mandala of the golden age. And so it's a quantum leap for human consciousness, and it's got a lot of components that I think most people haven't ever thought about. But I feel like to engage effectively with this plan, it's very helpful to have metacognition and meta-learning, and to have those concepts well at hand and well understood in order to engage in this ambitious course of study that's going to allow the creation of a golden age. And I'm just going to go over some of these again before we get into the full development in the next video. So first one is noetic and cognitive sciences, and that's very much related to what I've just been talking about with metacognition and meta-learning, is the ability to have an internal view into the mental states and to optimize mental states for happiness, mental and physical health, as well as data retention and data analytic, and the ability to communicate and transfer high density, high volumes of information with people around you. This is how you create science. This is how you create a revolution and a renaissance. So, and it's the recognition that the mind and the mental development is actually the foundation of our existence, and that every other skill, every other enjoyment, every other benefit that we could possibly hope to gain all stems from the mind. Okay. The second thing we're going to get into with this eightfold blueprint is going to be called, what I'm calling quantum field theory. So it's taking understanding, okay, so now if we start with our noetic sciences, we're thinking about the brain and the mind, and all these functions, our mental functions and our senses, are mediated, from what we understand, by photonics, electronics, so subtle electrical fields, photonic communication, and what now the OR theory is talking about in terms of quantum resonance, as evidenced by a phenomenon that people call, broad area or wide area gamma synchrony. So that means throughout the nervous system and throughout the, these microtubules and different tissues in the body, like there's wide area frequency synchronization. So if you think of like an oscillator, right? So all these different distant areas in the body are all oscillating at a common frequency, and they're resonating. And so normally in the old days, like when I was coming up, the way we were taught was like, okay, you got an electrical pulse that's traveling down the nerves, the dendrites and the axons and all that kind of crap, which is true. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. But if you think about that, that's like a gradual propagation wave, whereas there's a synchrony wave. There's a different kind of harmonic resonance and oscillation that's synchronized over all space. So in a way, you could think of it as being non-local. You could think of it as being a hollow fractal structure. And we know that a lot of these so-called Wegener crystals and a lot of these highly ordered solids and these superconductors and photonic crystals and on, laser crystals and so on like that, they're highly ordered solids. Now we're getting into quasi-crystals, which have 4-dimensional, 5-dimensional, and higher symmetry. So it has symmetry just beyond even our 3 dimensions, right? So it has time symmetry, okay? So that's getting into a kind of non-locality science. So if you think about that, but what's important is that this science is our consciousness. Like, our consciousness is a direct result of this type of non-locality science, okay? And so the pieces of that puzzle are gradually being built, but we're going to come to a much greater understanding of that soon, right? And this is one of the things that I'm going to be teaching, is this quantum field theory, how that pertains to human consciousness, and how that's a key ingredient in the golden age paradigm, the golden age mandala that I'm coming out with. And next we're getting into geometric design principles, and this includes 2D geometry, 3D geometry, 4 and 5D geometry, and this is coming back to quasi-crystals. So there's this thing called quasi-crystals. that has a lot of superconductivity properties. They're some of the hardest known materials, way harder, sometimes even 50 times harder than diamonds. They're being used in a wide variety of physical applications for high tolerance and high stress engineering. So fusion reactors, for instance, and different things of this nature, but also what we're calling aerospace applications as well. I'm sure they would be highly valuable in undersea applications. They're also being experimented with in terms of, human prostheses like joint replacements and different, because like they're in supreme durability to an extraordinary degree. But they also have these bizarre photonic and electrostatic properties. We've also identified what we're referring to as time crystals, which these are physical substances that are in a constant state of oscillation. So, and they're changing their physical structure. So they have metastructure, but their structure is time fractal. So we're getting crazy. We're getting into some crazy shit. But these are all very important concepts that are on the fringe cutting edges of technology that I think are, and they're highly related to what we're having in terms of information science and stuff like that. So like memory storage, data storage, information transfer, photonics, all kinds of stuff. Like this super important field of technology that I think very few people have gotten into. But this is just one aspect of what I'm calling the geometric sciences. So it's the understanding that integrates all the other scientific disciplines based upon geometry. Anyone who's studied any hard science, that it's highly relevant. Like for structure, like if you're an architect, you're studying statics and physics, geometry is indispensable. Same thing with chemistry, like all kinds of chemical properties and physiological properties within our body and everything like that. It's based on fundamental geometry. DNA, perfect example. This is a geometric crystal, okay? It's an optical crystal too, believe it or not. So I'm just giving a few examples of why geometry is so important. And so then the next thing we're going to get into is highly related to what I was calling quantum field theory, which is dealing with basically sound and light, the science of acousto-optics or optoacoustics, whatever you want to call it. This is highly important. But this, again, it's just one specific example of a more generalized type of vibrational science paradigm that I'm trying to bring. But we all know that light's a vibration and sound's a vibration, and they're both frequency based, and they both obey resonance phenomenon as well, and coherence, and they demonstrate coherence. And in fact, the coherent sound and coherent light, like lasers and phasers, I guess you would call them, these things are, very powerful. So much of the technology that we have now and all our information sciences and stuff like that is based on lasers and like all types of fine degree scanning, any kind of super high definition magnification that you want to do. It's all based on these types of crystalline formations of these different things and coherent light. So this opens our scientific horizons. By once we master that, now we can do laser interferometry in the body, measuring like nanometer and micrometer structures internal to the body. These are just gateways. Each one of these topics that I'm telling you is going to be multi-hour type presentation, but I'm trying to introduce the broad scope holistic thing of it. And so these are the topics that I'm going to introduce, and we'll go into all these in more detail in the next video. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching.